Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we're going to get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God and the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So I just want to say I feel really blessed, alhamdulillah, for those who have come today, because this is we call it the witching hour. It's the last hour before the breaking of the fast. And it's not an easy time to attend or to be attentive in a class-like setting. And I hope we don't treat this, inshallah, let's treat, it's not really a class, it's more of like a halaqah. And so we'll treat it more of like a study circle type scenario. The topic of the spiritual teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is, it's a vast topic, and we are going to be using this publication by Fons Vitae that has more than one author in terms of that they use as commentaries. It's called The Spiritual Teachings of the Prophet, and this has over 200 hadith. We're not going to look at all 200. There's 20 categories. Initially, I thought I'll take just 2 hadith from each category, 2 of like my favorite ones, and we'll only do 2. But I soon realized that's impossible because I like all the hadith that the book mentions. So I'm doing a little. I'm just kind of taking it as I go. So it's basically in no particular order. The first 40 that I just can't do without, so that appear in the order that it's mentioned in the book. But in terms of I wanted to read something from the introduction of the book. Why the spiritual teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and why they compiled this in the first place. And the introduction is very long, but I just wanted to read the section that's the very last part. And it's mentioned here that the great spokespersons of Muslim spirituality have strongly emphasized the importance of meditating upon the hadith, right, the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Thus, Al-Junayd, widely called master of the mystics, and I think that's not even a good translation. Like he wasn't, I don't like the word mystic. Mystic is just not the right term. Mysticism is often attributed to certain things in like the wider culture that has like really nothing to do with Islam. So is there Islamic mysticism? Yes, but the word mystic has connotations I'm not really comfortable with. But in Arabic, he was called Sayyid al-Ta'ifa. Like he's the master of the people who do this, the people who seek greater spiritual ascension in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he declared, this is a statement of Imam al-Junayd himself, he said, "Ilmuna madbut bil kitab wa sunnah." Our science is rooted in the book and the prophetic tradition. ومن لم يحفظ القرآن ولم يكتب الحديث ولم يتفقه لا يقتدي به. And whoever is not amongst those who have memorized the Quran, recorded the hadith, and mastered the sciences of fiqh must not be followed. And so this is an interesting statement because one of the things in the introduction is about how there's so many misconceptions about what do we mean when we say spiritual teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so to sit with the spiritual teachings and to benefit from them is not to say that we do so in the absence of the Sharia or the absence of the law. No, it's all together. And any kind of practice, like what he's basically indicating, is anyone who's going to make a claim about spirituality in Islam and introduce things that have nothing to do with the Kitab and the Sunnah, and introduce things that have nothing to do with the way of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, essentially, it's not, we don't take from them, we don't follow them. So all of what we learn about Islamic spirituality, it's within what we, the regular boundaries of Islam that everyone knows. And so the book mentions, or the introduction mentions, nevertheless, the importance of the prophetic Sunnah stressed by Al-Junayd is not to be interpreted just in a literal sense. It is clearly a matter of spiritual understanding for him. It is precisely this spiritual comprehension which is evoked by the hadith, distinguishing between the hamil al-fiqh, the bearer of knowledge. And fiqh was used not just to mean like do's and don'ts, but like a faqih literally means someone who understands the religion. So hamil al-fiqh is the one who bears an understanding, who carries the understanding of the religion. And the faqih, which is the person who's like really mastered the understanding. And this is also from the words of Imam Junayd. He said, may God fill the rewards with rewards the person who, having heard one of my words, memorizes it in order to transmit it to someone else. Indeed, it may be that someone transmits a deep knowledge, again, the word that's used is fiqh, to another who has been gifted with greater intelligence. And certainly it can happen that a bearer of knowledge may not be gifted with intelligence. So I kind of think that's how my circles are, by the way. I'm just transmitting in hopes that someone here is who has this special gift, inshallah, will have an insight and will be able to benefit others. It is hardly necessary to specify that the 234 hadith of this collection do not claim to exhaust the spiritual teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, but they do offer, we believe, an adequate picture of them, quite distant from the prejudices that have unfortunately become common. The aim of this anthology is to introduce readers to wisdom flowing from an oral tradition, and to help them revise what they know or what they believe they know about Islam and its Prophet ﷺ. The commentaries of the spiritual masters testify to their inspiration, their ilham. And so that's the commentaries in this book come from different scholars of the spiritual tradition in Islam. So it's not the authors or the people who compiled the book, like Fons Vitae is the publishing company, they're not the ones providing the commentary. It's all coming from people like Imam Ibn Ajiba, Imam Ghazali, Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, and others. So he says that the commentaries of the spiritual masters testify to their inspiration, ilham, and their long meditation upon the hadith, thus bringing to light numerous aspects which would remain in the dark without their teachings. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. This is why the present collection cannot be an introduction to the understanding of hadith, of which many already exist. It is rather a guide for meditation and deepening of understanding of the message of the last messenger of God. At a time when everything and its opposite is being said about Islam and its founder, it is more urgent than ever to offer readers, be they Muslim or not, the opportunity for a more direct contact with what remains a living source of wisdom, and which for more than 1 billion people embodies human perfection. And it mentions the verse in the Quran, verily in the messenger of God, you have a good example for him who looks unto God in the last day and remembers God much. So all of the traditions that are going to be mentioned in this class are quoted and have been either authenticated, meaning considered sahih, or validated, hasan, by Imam al-Suyuti, or by the specific author citing them. So, look, Assalamu alaikum. Imam al-Suyuti obviously is a famous hadith scholar, and alhamdulillah, I had the blessing of being able to actually visit his grave in Egypt. He was, I think, one of the first people to ever be called Shaykh al-Islam, because his knowledge was so vast that they just said that he was a sheikh of the whole religion. But he is, all of the hadith in this collection have either been verified by him or by others that are mentioned, like Bukhari or Muslim. I'll say it when we get through it, inshallah. So the first hadith that I'm going to go through different sort of categories. I wanted to read, I don't think, unfortunately, in Ramadan, we're not going to get through all 40 or we'll get through 40 for sure, 40 hadith, but we're not going to get through all 20 categories in the book. A list of the categories for people in terms of how they placed or what they decided was going to be a hadith that touches on the spiritual. First is the virtues, like makarim al-akhlaq. Then the dunya, which they translated as the here below, which I like. The here below. Supplication, the heart, predispositions, knowledge and gnosis, wisdom, interpretation of dreams, divine inspiration, the invocation of God, remembrance of death, God and his attributes, the Quran, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the prophets, the saints and the virtuous, mediation and seeking intercession. They have a chapter just on Khidr, I think is also significant because we read Surah Al-Kahf every Friday. The end of times, tradition and innovation. So those are the categories in the book. And I wish I maybe after we finish the third juz in tafsir, I really want to just go through this whole book because it's so beautiful. But I on one hand, I want to continue tafsir. On the other hand, I really love this book. And there's so much more commentary than, like, you have to keep the commentary short in order to keep going, but there's a lot that can be said about each hadith. So in the section that deals with virtues, again, makarim al-akhlaq, the hadith that I wanted us to look at is, and again, this book, for those who are interested, you can buy it on Amazon, Spiritual Teachings of the Prophet. It's not expensive to my knowledge. I don't think it is. Like, it's not one of those $100, $150 books. Yeah. So it's a good one to have in your library at home. So I remember one time as a child, I went into my parents' Islamic library, my dad's library, and I found a Hanafi handbook on fiqh. And like I was a kid, like a child, and I read the book, and I remember feeling this is, as a child who didn't have any formal background in Islamic studies properly. And this is just the fiqh rulings, right? So this is an old translation. It's from back then, like from whatever was available back then. I don't know if I could probably still find it. I just remember reading the book and getting angry. So, because it's like do's and don'ts. Don't do this, do this. This is wrong. This is not wrong, right? I remember reading the book and getting angry. Later on, as a child still, I found in my parents' library another book, and it was the 200 hadith. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? There's a 200 hadith that Al-Azhar had published a long time ago, right? It was the Arabic and the English. And so I think it was in the month of Ramadan where I decided I'm going to go through the whole book and I'm going to read it. And I remember reading the hadith, and I remember just feeling so like, I love the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I love my religion. I love all of it, And so I think the impact of hadith, again, although even that was categorized, and obviously the scholars chose which ones to put, and there was some commentary as well. But that's just to say that when a hadith a compilation has been put together by scholars or by specialists, you can expect it's going to be, inshallah, like a really beneficial, easy, anyone can benefit from it. So I want to say, like, this is a book you can have in your family library, and your kids can pick it up and they'll enjoy it, and your neighbor who's not Muslim can pick it up and they'll enjoy it. And it's one of those ones that you're not gonna have to worry about, wait, that means this. Don't worry about fiqh needs a scholar, right? In order to really learn fiqh properly, it's not just like a code of do's and don'ts. It needs a scholar, and it needs people who can understand it to explain it properly. Because fiqh books themselves were not written for lay people; they were written for scholars, and so it needs that level of person to kind of decode it. So the first hadith that I wanted us to read in virtues, عن سهل ibn Sa'd, إن الله كريم يحب الكرم ويحب معالي الأخلاق ويكره سفسفاها. Narrated Sahel ibn Sa'd, verily God is generous and loves generosity. He loves nobility of character and detests baseness. So this section on virtues does deal with character. And there's the other hadith that we're all very, very familiar with. where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that he was only sent. Verily, I have been sent to perfect nobility of character. Also, verily, the ones I prefer the most amongst you. This is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ saying this. Inna min ahabbakum ilayya ahsanukum akhlaqa. That really the ones I prefer the most among you are those who are noblest in character. So these are ones that we've heard. The reason why I wanted to focus on this third hadith about character is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us how to embody beautiful character by describing himself. So, Inna Allah Kareemun yuhibbul karam. That truly Allah himself is, and Kareem means both generous and noble at the same time, right? So Allah is generous and he's noble and he loves generosity and he loves nobility. And he loves ma'ali al-akhlaq is like the highest character traits, right? Like that's why they say the path is all adab, right? Because adab is like honesty is a bare minimum, right? Being an honest person, being truthful is a bare minimum. But adab is like really having the foundations, but also beautifying them within ourselves. And then وَيَكْرَهُ سَفْسَفَاهَا. The reason why I thought this last part was significant is the safi, safsafa is the same root as the word safi. And safi is often, it's understood as like a fool, right? And that God actually dislikes the most foolish or base. It's detests the base character qualities. It struck me because I know really beautiful people who have really wonderful general character, but they think so lowly of themselves that they sometimes will behave the fool. Does that make sense? Like they don't recognize that you are already dignified. Like, you have inner dignity. You have it. Everyone has it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, that he has ennobled the son of Adam. And so sometimes when people are foolish, not foolish, maybe you can say because they're not actually foolish, their souls are noble. When people behave foolishly, it's because they feel like they should for some reason, right? And sometimes people may behave that way because they think if I behave foolishly, then that's a form of humility, and then Allah would love me more because I'm being foolish and humble and think that's a good thing. But I want to say that like self-respect, self-esteem, not being a doormat where people just feel like they can oppress you, all of those things are not against like what Allah loves. Allah loves beautiful, noble character traits. And humility does not necessarily have to mean foolishness, right? So and a person can be humble in the sense of they don't think that they're everything or whatever good they have, they can ascribe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to be humble does not mean I need to behave in a way that makes honestly arrogant people comfortable, right? Because if you behave in a foolish way, it makes arrogant people comfortable. Makes them think, okay, like you're not threatening to me. You've kind of lowered yourself. You don't have to do that. I want to read from what Imam Ghazali mentions. He says that know that many have spoken about what nobility of character is. However, they have not expounded on its reality, but on the fruits it bears. Al-Hasan al-Basri has said, nobility of character is to have a relaxed face, to be generous, and to abstain from food, meaning not to be gluttonous. Nobility of character is a disposition, a hay'ah deeply rooted in the soul. When it manifests itself, praiseworthy actions are accomplished with ease and without any need of effort. Thus, if the inner disposition of an individual leads him to acting with beauty, both from the point of view of the intellect and that of the sacred law, one can speak of nobility of character. And again, I just want to pause here because he talks about acting with beauty. So there are people who have really beautiful manners, right? And wanting to beautify your manners or not as a form of like formalism, because this is something that our scholars also warn against. Formalism is like when you're like overly over the top, like you guys know what I'm talking about. Like I'm Afghan, so we have it in my culture. Really over the top, like it's I mean, it's good. I mean, they're nice manners, but they're social manners. They don't necessarily come from the heart. Like if you don't, someone who does this, they're like, oh, they did this, you know. And it's about what people. It's kind of like the way you need to be around people because that's considered acceptable manners, right? So you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Especially from an immigrant Muslim background, you guys know exactly, like how you. What was that? It's not genuine. It doesn't feel genuine. Yeah, so this is rooted in the soul. What he's saying is this beautiful character, it's actually rooted in the soul. It's rooted in it's an inner disposition. It allows them to do good things easily, right? So if you have to struggle against it, this is the humbling part for this narration is that if you have to struggle against yourself to do the right thing, then that right thing is not part of your natural disposition. It's not part of your natural character. Your what's part of your natural character is what's easy for you to do. Like it's part of the religion and it's easy for you. So for some people, alhamdulillah, being generous is like so natural for them. Like they could not be bakhil if their life depended on it because it's just against their soul to be stingy, right? And maybe we've met people like that. And for other people, it's like to be giving is like, I gotta give. I gotta give something. They think about it. They give themselves 10 points for giving, and you know what I mean? So it's but they do have to struggle against something to practice that. Um, but we know, alhamdulillah, إنما العلم بالتعلم والحلم بالتحلم, that truly knowledge is by like seeking it, right? By the practice of seeking it. And hilm, which is a beautiful character quality of forbearance, is by like forcing yourself to be forbearant. So that is another like element of this whole thing where Imam Ghazali, he says elsewhere, to fake it till you make it.
Assalamualaikum. I just quick question.
Sorry, we need to we will take questions, inshallah. I will leave questions in at a particular time. Forgive me.
Okay.
No problem. Or you can also put it in the chat box. Just because.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I don't want to forget.
Okay, cool. So my apologies to those of you online. I have my attention span usually requires a little bit of coffee, and in Ramadan, the last hour before iftar. There's a reason why I chose hadith, alhamdulillah. So just simple like things will kind of get me out of my flow. But I do want to answer the questions, inshallah. So if they're put in the chat box, I can get to them when we take a break for that. So essentially, Imam Ghazali says to fake it till you make it. So if you don't have this quality, this beautiful quality, then you just keep practicing it until it becomes part of you. There's hope, in other words, there's hope by just through sheer practice, something that wasn't already natural to your disposition, what you were born with, that it can actually become natural to you through practice. And he actually mentions the same example. He says, we have spoken about this disposition as being deeply rooted in the soul because he who manifests generosity only occasionally and for outward motives is not characterized by generosity, which is sakha. Likewise, we have considered it a condition that praiseworthy actions be performed with ease, because the person who must make a great effort to make a gift or to keep silent while in anger is not characterized by generosity or forbearance. Again, I just want to say the good news is the harder it is to do the right thing, the more reward you have for it. So maybe for the person who it's easy, of course, it's going to be easy for them, so they may do more of that thing, right? So like they'll have that particular deed or that particular way that they relate to others in the world, they're going to have a lot of reward because it'll be normal and natural for them. But for the person who struggles and they still push themselves to purify their character in that way, that struggle there's a lot of reward in it. And the more patience they have to practice in order to do that, again, for a single act, the person who struggles with the quality of good character would have way more reward than the person that it comes to them easily. So alhamdulillah, there's always good. The next part I wanted us to look at is also something that I think comes up for us in the month of Ramadan as it relates to beautiful character. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, and this is related on Abu Hurairah, عن أبي هريرة أفضل الأعمال بعد الإيمان بالله التودد إلى الناس. Narrated Abu Huraira that the best deed after belief in God is benevolent love towards people. So that's I think that's huge. That is huge. After your iman itself, after faith in God, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, أفضل الأعمال. And an amal is usually like something you physically actually do, right? Like you give a charity, you forgive a person. I don't know, you do something. You get up and do something, right? But what he's saying is at-tawaddud coming from, wad, which is love, right? It's a protective love, actually. And the beautiful name of Allah, Al-Wadud, right, is the most loving and also can mean the most beloved. So at-tawaddud ila nas is like this benevolent love towards people. That's like the best deed after faith in God. And this is why like one of the paths to God is mahabba. It's actually love. And not just love of him, it's actually love of the creation. It's often said al-mahabba wal-khidma, love and service. There's I think there's five, the book about the five love languages, right? So there's like praise, there's words of praise, words of affirmation, okay, and service. What else is there?
Quality time.
Quality time, touch, and gifts. Oh, you guys are all familiar with what I'm talking about, mashallah. So there's these five different love languages, and different people lean differently as it relates to how they perceive love. But at-tawaddud ila nas it really is like the fact that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is addressing the spiritual state of the heart that is the reason for whatever the action is going to be. Right? So it could be any of these five love languages, but where is it coming from? At-tawaddud ila nas, this benevolent love. Love, the location of that love is in the heart. If you sit in a room and you just love everyone in that room, I just want to, without doing a single thing, an actual act of service or anything at all, do you think the room changes? Yes. Yeah. If you sit in a room and you're annoyed with people in the room, you don't say a single thing about it, do you think the room changes? So subhanAllah, this is something that is actually like part of our spiritual path, and part of spiritual purification is working on love. And I remember I asked one of my teachers about like, because Imam Ghazali said there's three levels, right? The lowest level is when he described love as from a place of giving. So like the lowest level of like love for your brother or sister in Islam is when you give only when you have extra. And then above that is when you give like half of what you have, you split what you have half and half. And then the third is ithar, when you prefer your brother or sister over yourself, when you yourself are desperately in need of something yourself, right? And so I was actually my question was going to be about, that highest level of love, which is ithar. How do we get there? And then the teacher stopped me and they said there is no such thing as a highest level of love. Because like your love can always get more and more and more. There's no like peak to, okay, now I've reached the highest level of love. So a person can surpass ithar in the way that they love the creation of God. And so I thought that was beautiful, that like there is no limit to it. But really cultivating it and thinking within ourselves, like what is it that prohibits my heart from being that way, from being loving towards God's creation? You can say it's all their fault. If someone behaves in a particular way that you don't want them to behave, it's all their fault. That doesn't mean obviously like this tawaddud ila nas, like we still have a religion that has sharia, so there's laws and there's courts and there's justice and there's like freedom for Palestine. We believe in all of that, and there's heaven and there's hell, right? So we believe in all of that, but the general disposition towards mankind, right, the general disposition towards our brothers and sisters should be one of love. And this is the fact that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he refers to this as afdal al-a'mal ba'd al-iman, is really big. And to me it means that you read it in these words and you feel very much that I wish I was taught this when I was 5, to learn it so much later on in life. It's fine, alhamdulillah, better late than never. But you know how like you tell a 5-year-old this becomes their deen. You know what I mean? This the day like when a child is in Sunday school, like what you teach them. If you give them the Hanafi family handbook, that's one thing. But if you tell them this, it's a whole other situation. So I am a happy Hanafi, by the way. Like I love the Hanafi method. I love Imam Abu Hanifa. I'm very comfortable with the Hanafi school of thought. Just saying. There's also in relation to this, the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said, and he's not talking about the best of deeds after faith. Now he's just talking about the best of faith. And he says, عن معقل ابن يسار أفضل الإيمان الصبر والسماحة. The best faith is, in the translation here, is that which is accompanied with patience and forbearance. So, I mean, I think we actually live in a time where we can witness, we understand what that means very clearly. We can very comfortably say the best faith that we've ever seen is the faith of the Palestinian people. Because you can't understand, like no one can understand how anyone goes through that, and they're all standing together right now and praying in Tarawih, and the kids are still taking whatever scraps of paper they have left and cutting them and turning them into lanterns and singing Ramadan Mubarak songs. I mean, it's patience like we've never seen. Like it's truly in my lifetime, I have not seen patience like that. So it's, I mean, we have a very clear picture in terms of the best faith being patience. And then samaha is this forbearance. A forbearance with one another, like between Muslims, and is something that I don't, again, it's one of those lessons that I wish I would have heard more of when I was growing up as a kid. Maybe I'd have less anger issues now. I don't know. We don't say if, but I do know that this is something that we can teach young people today. We can focus on these beautiful character qualities. And the word samaha comes from the root samuha, which means to be generous, magnanimous, kind, liberal, open-handed, to grant from a generous heart, to authorize, permit, and empower. I mean, this root is like, it has a lot in it. And forbearance is something that if someone has this kind of forbearance, an ability to overlook, an ability to forgive, who's the most empowered, right? When they do that? The person they're forgiving or themselves, that they've actually freed themselves from the grudge, or from whatever is holding them back from just letting it go and letting God deal with the situation, right? Samaha is like, I heard it described once as when a small child who doesn't know any better is angry and comes running at its mother, his or her mother, starts like hitting or kicking or whatever. And the mother loves the child. So the mother will not hit or kick the child back. The mother will just kind of restrain the hands and stop the child, calm the child down, hug them, kiss them. You know what I mean? That's like samaha. And if you, it's that level of mercy, and like, you can't do something to offend me. You know, you're my child. You can't offend me. So it's that level. And it was said that also that the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, they had this quality. They had this ability to forgive, and to have this, like, it's a forbearance that's a forgiving forbearance. Like when you go to someone, you say, Samihni, right? It's like, forgive me, just overlook me, overlook what I've done. So the best of faith, right? Afdalul iman as-sabru was-samaha, is patience, right? And this overlooking, this pardoning, this forgiving. What I also find significant about this particular narration, as we're in the month of forgiveness and we're in the month where we're hoping that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all of our sins and purifies us completely, we come out like newborn babies, and that the fast itself is something that's supposed to strengthen the muscle of patience within us, is that like our faith itself grows when we forgive. Like our faith grows. Our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually grows because of our practice of forgiveness. So I wanna ask, just open-ended, why would our faith grow because we forgive others?
Maybe because we believe that what we'll get if we do that difficult thing better for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a lot of faith
Mm-hmm.
to do that.
we're putting our faith in God's promise, right? We're putting our faith that God said that if we forgive and we practice this, man la yarham la yurham, right? So the one who doesn't show mercy is not shown mercy. Or also the other hadith about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful, and He shows, if you show merciful to the people in the world, then Allah will show mercy to you. So there's a lot there. As we think about this month of Ramadan and growing our hearts spiritually, we often think about it in terms of so many good deeds that we can do, right? Because we want to do them. Like reading Quran is bliss, right? Standing in prayer and tarawih is enjoyable, alhamdulillah, in this month. But like forgiving someone is not always enjoyable, right? And letting it go is not always enjoyable. And the effect of it after you've done it, yes, after that a person is free. Like the person has like they feel the relief of the action itself. But while they're still struggling with doing it, it's not an easy thing necessarily to do, especially if they've been harmed in a very deep way. But it also, it's saying that I put my faith, my my trust in God to do things that are difficult, right? To do things that are not easy. Patience is the same way. A person can go through the same thing, like two people, and one person will practice patience, another person will not. And it's the same thing. You didn't change by becoming impatient. One did not better the situation, right? So in the end, patience is actually the response of the intellect. There's no good in responding terribly in this situation. Sometimes you have a right to respond terribly, but is that really the best outcome for you? One's faith increases when we act by the light of our intellect, and the light of our intellect is rooted in the heart. Okay, let me just check one thing real quick. Okay, so someone wants us from like the organizers to post the link. I think the link for the book. Okay, barakallahu feekum. And also thank you for the 5 love languages that relate directly to the 5 pillars of Islam. So words of affirmation, shahada, physical touch is saum, receiving gifts, zakah, quality time, salah, acts of service is hajj. Wow, mashallah, that's beautiful. And just as a side note, my daughter, who's 5 years old, definitely for her love language is acts of service. So if I come home and I sit next to her and I want to like hug her, she's like, she doesn't want me to hug her. She's like, go and make me some food. And then after you make me some food, bring me these toys. And then you're going to color with me. She has like a plan of things that I will do for her. And that's how I show her that I love her. But if I come and hug her and kiss her and be like, oh, I miss you, that means nothing. Work for me, my mother. Work for me. And then I will. And then I believe you love me. So, alhamdulillah. But service is actually, subhanAllah, service definitely is something that if you've ever been on the receiving end of beautiful service and khidmah, it's something that is, it's definitely a gift. And at the same time, the one who serves, like to be a person of service and to allow that service to come from a place of love, is also something that elevates us on a spiritual level with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And oftentimes, subhanAllah, like people who do humanitarian aid work and they're in the field and they see some really difficult things. One of the things they always say is it's actually in, the connection with the people that they're serving, that they themselves feel like they got so much more than what they gave. I hear stories like this all the time from people who are in relief work, that it's actually like it's not work for them anymore, because they actually feel like they're getting so, like they're not doing it with the intention of trying to take something from anyone, but when they're of service to people who are in need, especially, what they get back from that is so much more than what they gave. Okay, now another narration that I think goes along with some of the ones that we were talking about, and I think it's also, again, important for us in Ramadan. There's 2 of them, they're related. عن مهجن ابن الأدراء خير دينكم أيسره. The best thing about your religion, here they translated it as its simplicity, but it can also be translated as it's that which is easiest. خير دينكم, the best of your religion. So it's not religion in general, but your religion, the best of your religion is that which is easiest for you. And it can also be translated as in its simplicity. In another narration from the same Sahabi, or another riwayah, إن الله تعالى رضي لهذه الأمة اليسر وكره لها العسر. Verily God, exalted be He, has decreed simplicity, again, it's ease, for this community, and He detests difficulty for it. So this is actually significant as well in terms of like spiritual growth. The idea that خير دينكم أيسره, that like the best of your religion is that which is easiest. There is for every person an act of worship that comes to you easier than others. Like everyone has it. Everyone has something. Maybe this worship is harder, but this one's really easy, right? So for some people, I know people that like they make dua all day long. It's like dua is the easiest thing. But if you ask them like come and join us in the Masjid Tarawih, they're gonna say no. But they are people of dua. Like this is their easy. It's very, very easy. It's very natural for them. It's as natural for them as like breathing. Other people, for example, what comes easy for them is a connection to the remembrance of God in nature, right? So they can, because that's just where they're at. So it's when they're there, it's easy for them to bring other people there as well, because that is what is easiest for them. That's natural to their spiritual disposition. So everyone has something like that. We think about in Ramadan, like this month, like ask yourself, does everyone here know which ibadah comes to them easiest? Do you know? No? Okay. There's an act of worship, like you actually love doing it, you enjoy doing it, you don't feel haraj in it, Okay, mashallah. All right, so knowing that khayru dinukum is actually in that thing that comes to you easily. Why is that? Why is that? Well, I'll go to the commentary, inshallah. But there's something that's related to the simplicity and the ease of this religion, and how that ease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted each and every one of us with becomes a huge door to Him in our journeys to Him. So what's mentioned here is spiritual and religious life must not be complicated to the point of becoming unbearable. And it is not by making things difficult that one progresses on the path to God. In fact, the spiritual masters in general have a tendency to invite their disciples to reach the essential in their practices and to avoid any excess of zeal which could imprison them in a false ego-centered inwardness. Okay, so they like in terms of when you host a guest, they say like you should do it in a way that's simple, like generous, but there shouldn't be like the guest should not feel that the takalluf, right? No takalluf. Meaning it's easy to do what it is, and this was nothing, and oh, this was in my fridge, and don't worry about it, and that kind of thing. And even if a person did actually put a lot of work into it, like again, if you do it from a place of love, people tend to enjoy it, and they don't see it as being so hard because they actually enjoy the preparation, they enjoy all of it. So love is like how you make things easier. That may not come easily. But if you think about when it comes to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the relationship is about Him, it's not about us, right? So when we have, and again, I grew up in situations where this was emphasized, whether it was like in Sunday school. I mean, my daughter just came back from Islamic school with a huge checklist. I was like, they're starting her on checklist young. She's only 5. Here's the checklist for Ramadan. But that sort of like there's a checklist culture, like productivity culture, where it becomes really more about you and your productivity than it has to do with God. And so the best of your worship is that which comes easiest to you is like, no, because it's not about, like God does not, He says it in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. I might have got that switched. I don't remember. Did I switch it? So إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ لَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. No, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. I had it right. It's okay. It's Ramadan, we're fasting. It's okay, inshallah. But the point is that like when it becomes this productivity checklist, and it's about our nafs, and it becomes our ego, and it becomes like this becomes a cause of our own thinking, I'm better than everybody else, and look at how much I did, and I bet you they didn't do as much as I did. And it could be this thing that was really hard, and look at this thing that was really hard that I did. No one else would do this. I do this because it's really hard and I do hard things, right? Like there's all these kinds of waswas to make it not about God. Make it not about God, right? So when the worship is actually something easy, there's less ego in it because you don't perceive it as being like an effort to begin with, right? So you enter the worship like to worship God. It's like the distance between your heart and this is about God is very short when it's easy. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is there's no reason to deliberately make things hard on ourselves in general when it comes to religion when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy. And this aspect of the Sharia being ease and not hardship is repeated in the Quran. Also that our Sharia was deliberately made easier than the Sharia of Bani Israel. So the law of Bani Israel was difficult. One of the reasons it was difficult is because they made it more difficult upon themselves by asking questions, right? We get that in Surah Al-Baqarah, right? Like you just a cow, okay, what color, what size, what this, what that. So the point of it is really that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our connection with Him, when it's about Him and not about, again, this something that's ego-centered, then the worship itself is going to become easy. Inshallah, it's going to be easy. And there's a statement of, Imam Ibn Arabi, he quotes someone named Abu Sa'ud ibn Ash-Shibli, who was a companion of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. And I love this. He says, كان يقول ما هو التصوف إلى الصلوات الخمس وانتظار الموت. What is tasawwuf? What is like the spiritual path? Except praying your 5 daily prayers and waiting for death. So why is he saying waiting for death, by the way? Like, is he just done with this world? Is this dunya so nothing? Like,
Well, because this is just a test, right?
what was that?
I was gonna say, because this is just a test. Like, this isn't really where we belong. So why would you look forward to living here when it's not even, doesn't really scale out? We're gonna leave. We know that. No matter what you believe, we know we're gonna leave.
That's right. So like this idea that this is not the final abode, this is not the final destination. But what happens, what's the happiest moment that a believer gets in the afterlife? What was that? It's meeting God, right? So what he's saying is that what is the spiritual path other than like doing your worship and aspiring to meet God? Like that's what it is. Like all the worship, all of everything is just because you want to have a beautiful meeting with God. Right? So there's a lot to be said on this. When even in terms of yusr or the religion is easy, the verb yasira means to be or become easy. It also means to be small or little, right? Yusr or yasura, it can mean to be insignificant. It can also mean another form of the verb is to level, smoothen, pave, prepare, to ease, make easy, or facilitate. Aysar it doesn't necessarily mean the easiest aspect. It can also mean the smallest, the slightest. Again, the more insignificant. The more insignificant. So what if if you considered the best of your deeds, or the besting of your religion to be that which you didn't actually consider to be very significant? What's the easiest thing for us that we consider to be insignificant?
Oh, the tongue.
Well, the tongue is involved. Definitely, tongue's involved. What's the easiest aspect of practice of our faith? What was that? Dhikr, just to remember God. So imagine like the best of your faith is the easiest thing for anyone to do, which is to remember God. It's hard for us to say like, because we think it has to be hard. This, life is hard. Like, there's tests or tribulation. Things have to be really dramatic. Sometimes we see ourselves as the heroes in our own movies. There needs to be this thing, but it's like subhanAllah that the best of our religion is actually going to be rooted in the easiest aspect of it, which is to remember God. No, there is no such thing as an act of worship without the remembrance of God, right? So it's an act of worship because remembrance of God is part of it. It's what makes it worship. I'm looking at the time, and we did not get very far at all. Due to time, I'm going to just read some of the narrations And then if we have time next week, we'll go back and look at them. So a narration I wanted to read for you all today was, this one is very similar to what we just talked about. So inshallah, the commentary that we just gave will help. عن معاذ بن جبل أخلص دينك يكفيك القليل من العمل. Be completely, narrated by Mu'adh bin Jabal, be completely sincere in your religion and a few good deeds will suffice you. Doesn't that go completely against the productivity like culture? It's really quality. It's really about quality and not quantity. You can have, there's nothing wrong with quantity, but again, the focus should be quality. And it doesn't mean also that you abandon quantity because you don't have the quality you want. It's just you're always, no matter what we're doing, we're seeking for it to actually have this sense of connection. So Imam al-Junayd, he mentions, complete sincerity implies that the intention be devoted solely to God and that its aspiration, its qasd, is focused perfectly on Him. And this sincerity takes place through the attentive presence of the soul to the origin of things and the clear vision of inner changes, talween, that can occur. So the sensitivity within us that like, okay, I set out to do something for God. Okay, now something's come up for me. Maybe it's this thing or that thing, but having that level of self-awareness that we can notice that when the intention changes or when the intention becomes distracted, when something else becomes the focus. Again, I think this class goes until like 15 more minutes and then we're done, right? Okay, so I still have a little bit of time. Imam Junayd, well, this is what I was saying. He says, this is how a sincere man accepts in himself what conforms to his aspiration towards God. And this is how he rejects the manifestations of his ego and the influences of the enemy. This requires the extinction of all individual consideration and the constant attention to divine grace. A completely sincere man finds his happiness in the awareness that he is a receiver of divine favor, which renders him indifferent to the criticisms of men. So it doesn't mean that he thinks, okay, I'm like higher than everyone else, but he sees the truth. And the truth is that God is constantly giving us what's best. So he sees himself in the receiving end of receiving God's divine favor. If he's in a state of like bliss and enjoyment and able to understand certain things, even if other people are saying like, how can you do that? He doesn't care because he's seeing things as they are. Similarly, he experiences aversion to being praised, fearing that this will harm his spiritual integrity. Thus, one no longer notices the opinions of creatures as soon as the spiritual states intervene. But this is known only to the conscience of the completely sincere and necessarily escapes others. So Imam Junayd is the one who mentions this. Imam Ibn Ajibah, he says that complete sincerity consists of freeing one's behavior before God from all worldly preoccupation, so that God becomes the only goal of our worship, or in clearing the heart from all that is not the Lord. Complete sincerity of the common people consists in acting without worrying about being seen by others. Complete sincerity of the spiritual elite is asking without asking for any reward. So they're doing what God wants, but they're not like, and I want this in paradise, and I want this, they're not expecting, even though reward we ask for, generally speaking, we ask for reward, but to do the worship with this worship for that, tit for tat kind of thing, that's not how they worship. Neither in this world nor in the next. So they're not looking for a worldly benefit or one in the next. And then complete sincerity of the elect amongst the elite is to not attribute to oneself either might or strength, and to forget all otherness in order to consider only the one, so that every act is by God, from God, and for God. Now that last part is above my pay grade. But it's, I've heard it described as, and even one of my classes in grad school that was on the spiritual tradition in Islam, is that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the cause of all causes and He is the necessary existent, all other existence is dependent upon Him. So we're all creation that depend on Him. And He inspires the good in us. So even though that we get reward for our good deeds, we know that those good deeds were only possible through the divine decree and by His blessing and His favor. So someone who prays to God, you know, sincerely and with beautiful khushu', maybe they experience certain things. But as it relates to God, again, this was AUC, so this is like a grad school. I don't even remember if the professor was Muslim, to be honest. But what they were talking about and talking about some spiritual tradition, they said it's as if God is the source of all the worship that is done unto him. So they said it in words that we as Muslims wouldn't say, which is it's as if he is praying to himself through the body of one whom he created. Now, I wouldn't say that because that's not that was my professor's understanding. But the point is that like there is a level of realization of the oneness of God. And so the servant does not attribute their good to themselves at all. They don't see it as their strength or their might or their power or their anything. They see whenever good deeds are flowing from them, they only see God's blessing upon them, not their own anything. So again, so every act is by God, meaning he's the cause of the strength and the might and the ability to do it, and from God and for God.
Shaykha, I'm so sorry. Could you just repeat the last line of the narration? I just disconnected for that second. Just the last line. So sorry.
No problem. Complete sincerity of the elect amongst the elite is to not attribute to oneself either might or strength, and to forget all otherness in order to consider only the one, so that every act is by God, from God, and for God.
Thank you so much, Jazakallah.
There's one, I'm going to skip everything just to go to one that I wanted to get in today before the fasting day is done, inshallah. And we're skipping all the way from hadith number 15 to 35. عن أبي هريرة ادعوا الله وأنتم موقنون بالإجابة واعلموا أن الله لا يستجيب دعاء من قلب غافل له. Narrated from Abu Huraira, supplicate God with the certitude that he will answer you. Know that God does not answer the supplication uttered with a distracted and inattentive heart. So there's much to say in the commentary, but before I get into it, to make one dua with khushu', to make one dua with your heart, to make one dua where you actually feel, you may experience feeling that the sort of like the opening that comes with dua. People often in Ramadan when they're making the dua of in the witr prayer, the entire congregation is praying, is crying. A lot of, if in Egypt especially, like the Egyptians, you can hear them wailing in the dua part. That's actually a sign of God's mercy. And it's said that when you feel that opening in your dua, to ask for whatever you want because God's answering you. Like you entered a place of attentiveness in your dua where he's going to answer. I'm just going to quickly mention the other two narrations that lead up to this and before we get into the commentary. Hadith number 32 briefly was, supplication is the weapon of the man of faith, or is the weapon of the believer, the mainstay of religion, and the light of the heavens and the earth. Also from Ibn Umar, narrated from him, when the servant is given a spiritual opening during a supplication, he should pray to his Lord, for then he shall be answered. Right? So this is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. إذا فتح على العبد الدعاء فليدعو ربه فإن الله يستجيب له. So this, putting the three narrations together, and especially this last one about having an attentive heart, we don't need to have like huge laundry lists of prayers, right? Of all the different things we want answered. Just the main things that if we pray for them with a sincere heart, with a heart that's attentive, that's really connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to know that that is, that the answer for that is there. The fact that, a lot of times out of adab, out of a desire for adab, people will make a dua like, oh Allah, only if you want to, but if, can I, ace my exam or whatever, it could be a small thing. But this idea of to pray to Allah, well, and you have yaqeen in His answer, it means you don't ask for the dua in a shy way. You ask for it like He's God, like He's your Lord. So He will come to Him asking for it, like fully, and also with certainty that He can answer and that He will answer. So what's the distinction between the muqinun, right? The people who have the certainty, and the people who they're just distracted. Yes.
Right? In terms of like, I know, recently talking to my sister about this, where culturally different cultures approach that differently. Like some culture, like basic culture, like we're like very much like we won't, the way that we ask is like very like, we don't ask as much, and or at least that's what I grew up with. Versus like, my sister was saying she was talking to like someone like a Yemeni friend, where they were like we like kind of. It sounds really bad, but they're like we command or like we like ask in a very like forceful way. And I wanted to ask about that and like what is the adab around that, because I know that there's like I've heard this from Shuyukh before, but I feel like it's like a fine line and whatnot on how to go about talking in your dua.
So when it comes, I think it has to do with the spiritual state. So I've heard, I love, by the way, like the Yemenis when they make dua, it's so beautiful. Like I don't know if you've heard long Yemeni dua from the people who study in Yemen. I literally say, you guys in your du'as. Like it's like they make dua for everything and it flows like water. Like it just comes naturally because they're used to plentiful dua. So it's just like it's like a waterfall. I remember a sister who had studied in Yemen and she was making dua for someone else. And I'm like, the thing she thought of, it was just coming. I was like, me, like for all of us, but it was beautiful. So it's like they're used to saying everything and asking. So on the other hand, I know what you're referring to too. So there's a difference between someone feeling shy to ask God because they think they're asking for too much, right? Like if I ask you, can I borrow your clothes, your whatever it is, like if I do that like 4 times, I'm gonna feel shy to do it a 5th time if I have any sense, right? So like, why do I keep asking you for something? And am I asking too much? Am I being annoying, right? So if that's the state at which a person is like feeling shy and asking them that's not correct, because Allah is Allah. But if the person is hesitant to ask because they have so much certainty in the fact that God's decree is already the best, so it's not like they have something about like their general sort of disposition towards God is like one of loving surrender. So they don't really have wants in the first place because of the deep state of loving surrender. They're just responding to what God is doing in the world. But it's a state. It doesn't mean that you need to stay in that state. A person in that state may not feel the need for any dua. I know people who have gone all the way to the Kaaba, and after looking at the Kaaba for like a few minutes, they're like, I literally have nothing to pray for. Like I feel like it's all been answered, like it's there's nothing in their heart to ask for it because it already feels like it's already been answered, So that's a different state than feeling like I'm so shy, I don't want to ask for more because I don't want to be annoying, or like that fear of annoyingness is something between us as creation with one another, but not when it comes to Allah. Dua is described as mukhli ibadah. It's like worship itself, or like the bone marrow of worship, or the essence of worship. So sometimes people do like their du'as are done, but they just keep doing dua because that's the worship that has eased for them, right? So they do it just because they want to spend more time with God talking to Him. It's not because necessarily like they even need whatever it is they're asking for. It's just a way of worshiping Him. At the same time, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us to make dua. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself, the best of creation, always made dua. So it's not like, again, I think there's different spiritual states, and a person can, in one spiritual state, not feel the need to supplicate. But if that's because they're just so content with God, that's not necessarily wrong. But what the narration says is, إِذَا فُتِحَ عَلَى الْعَبْدِ الدُّعَاء. So if basically you're inspired to ask God for something, then you should, right? Like don't suppress and ask and say, no, I shouldn't ask. If you have an ask it, because you're being inspired to ask. If you don't have anything, right, then that's like because you're in a state of like just happiness or remembrance of God, or the wants are all gone at that moment because you're just maybe in a state of presence. That's different. you're not suppressing any like want. But if you have a want, you know, if we ask of Allah. Right? Sorry.
From Yemen.
Yeah.
So in Yemen, we believe that Allah يحب العبد أو يحب الإلحاح في الدعاء.
Yeah.
الإلحاح means that you say the mouth over and over and over.
Repetition, yes, repetition. Yeah. I think we're over time. I didn't get to the commentary on this one. Maybe we'll start with it, inshallah, for next time. But I think we covered one, two. It's not about the quantity. It's not about the quantity. We're not gonna look at it. Inshallah, we'll close. But hopefully for our week, maybe something to take from this as we're in the month of Ramadan, the emphasis on you know like deeds that come from a place of love. So whether it's loving God's creation, and so whatever you do for them, that being the core sort of essence of what's in your heart. And then when it comes to our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it's the quality and it's being attentive, and it's you know, this idea of if you have ikhlas, then يكفيك قليل من العمل. Like you don't, it's not about doing so much, but do the little that you do, but do it beautifully, do it centered with God. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى، وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء، وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى، علمنا ما ينفعنا، ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به، واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم، آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما، وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما، لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven. Not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen.